Welcome to After Cana, a Ferris Love podcast dedicated to exploring the vocation of marriage. In each episode, we bring you stories, advice, and insights from experts and seasoned couples to help guide you in your journey, whether you're dating, engaged, or newly married. I'm your host, Gabby Quinlan. I'm so excited to introduce to you all Regina Boyd, a licensed marriage and family therapist and mental health counselor. She is also the founder of Heart Space Therapy Center in Florida. Regina brings together the Catholic faith and her clinical insight to help people build healthy, lasting relationships. She's also led workshops, given talks on marriage and emotional wellness, and been featured on several podcasts. I'm so excited to hear her wisdom today on habits, virtues, connections that all contribute to building healthy relationships. So welcome, Regina.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabby. I'm really excited.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. And just for our listeners to know, Regina was also featured on the Ferris Love podcast. So we'll make sure to link that episode below. It was a great conversation. So you'll definitely have to give that a listen as well. So Regina, just to kick things off, I wanted to ask you about Heart Space Therapy Center and your mission, which is bringing hope, healing, authentic connection to your clients. How does that mission shape your approach to counseling and just your approach to life in general?
Yeah, I really fall back on what we believe, right? Is that we are created for connection. If you think about it, we believe in a God who is Trinity, and he exists in this eternal exchange of relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit. And if we're created in God's image and likeness, then that means we are created to be in this exchange of love as well with one another. And so that the more that we can fulfill our relationships and be successful in loving other people well, I believe that we are more acting in God's image and likeness in that way. So we're really designed for it. We need relationships. We need other people to survive. We've all heard those stories of, children in orphanages who pass away from not having enough human contact, right? And so it's really in our DNA. We're created and designed for that. I believe God created us that way. And so that's really a lot of what fuels sort of my motivation and passion when it comes to counseling and therapy is how can we strengthen those connections in our lives and make sure our relationships are as healthy as possible so that they can be life-giving for us, but also for the people that we interact with day to day.
Yeah, that's so important for sure. And so today we're going to be talking about like kind of the building blocks of healthy relationships, what that looks like not only for romantic relationships, but all relationships really. If you had to pinpoint a few key cornerstones, building blocks of a healthy relationship, what would those be?
I think trust is one of the most important ones. It forms the foundation for anything, whether it's open communication, a sense of emotional safety, mutual respect. All of those things are necessary for a healthy, lasting relationship, but you can't have any of those without that foundation of trust. And a lot of times when we hear that word trust, people think, oh, does that mean someone's going to cheat on me or something like that? And it's more than that. It's more than just not cheating. It's, will you be there for me? Will you be there for me if I going through a hard time, I lose a job, or if my mother-in-law criticizes me, are you going to be there and support me? Through all this. So trust is really foundational for so many of those other factors that are important as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've just noticed in my marriage, I've been married for 2.5 years now, so I'm still early on, but just, the day to day, putting in a lot of work and effort into, our marriage, our baby, our family, that hard work builds trust also. And I think, I think people have a hard time trusting others, and one way to I don't know, accept that someone has your best interest, or one way to grow in trust with someone is to like acknowledge their hard work and the effort they're putting into a relationship in the day to day. And yeah, just build that availability, that space to be vulnerable with that other person. So I totally
Absolutely.
agree. Okay, so one of the topics we probably touch on in every episode of After Cana is communication. Obviously, in romantic relationships, communication can go really haywire. And in any relationship, communication is really important. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the habits that people can take on that make communication really effective? And what are some things that get in the way, as you've seen it in your work with a lot of couples and individuals?
Okay, it might sound a little cliche, but I mean, I am a therapist, but it's also really that important. I mean, listening is huge. And
Mhm.
not just hearing the words going into my ear canal and processing, but am I listening to understand?
Yeah.
We can't come to any type of solution or agreement with another person unless we really understand where they're coming from. So that means you have to take it a little bit of a step further of, maybe summarizing what you just heard the person say to make sure you're on the same page, but listening with some empathy a little bit too, right? So not letting our emotions get in the way, because sometimes when we hear somebody say something, the defenses come up and we start automatically thinking of what we're going to say back to that person, how we're going to defend our position. And so we really want our disposition of heart to be in a place where we want to put the other person's desires above our own. And that's so hard to do, especially if it's a conflict type of conversation.
Right.
But if both people are mutually putting themselves in that disposition of putting the other person first, then there's no need to worry. That means both of our needs are going to be met and we're going to be taken care of. So I think that's a way to be really effective, is thinking about how can I serve the other person well and love the other person well in this interaction. And then one thing that leads to things going off track, right, is if we get really defensive, we jump to conclusions, we're more worried about defending our own side of things, and putting ourselves before the other person.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Do you have any like examples of a couple you might have counseled that maybe struggled with this, and how it played out when they kind of implemented some of the strategies you're mentioning?
Oh my goodness, I feel like it's every
Yeah.
couple in the world does this,
Yeah,
It could
totally,
it
totally.
could
I'm like,
literally
ooh, guilty when you're talking.
exactly. It could
Oh.
literally be everyone because it's hard. I mean, some of the
Mhm.
things we work on in counseling is really slowing the conversation down. So it feels really clunky and awkward because we don't speak this way naturally. So
Right.
I will guide people through exercises of, okay, you're the speaker, you're the listener, so taking turns, right? So when you're in the listener role, that means you're not talking. The speaker is the one talking. And then in the listener role, you have to first summarize what you heard the speaker share and let
That's
them
good.
know, right? Let them know what you think you heard, right? Because it helps in two ways. It helps you as the listener make sure you understood what was being said, but it also helps the speaker understand, wait, is that actually what I was trying to convey? Actually, let me reword that. That isn't what I meant?
Sure.
So it's
Yeah.
helpful for both people. But then can we so I think all that to say is it really helps slow the conversation down well enough to get to the heart of what really matters. We just
Yeah.
blow past that understanding piece and we jump to, well, what do we do? How do we fix this? I'm really upset.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can slow down, it's awkward because it's like, "Oh, what I heard you saying is this, it doesn't feel natural. We don't speak that way every day, but it
Sure.
makes such a huge difference. And I've seen so many couples come to huge realizations of, oh, wow, I was assuming that, by purchasing this item at the grocery store, you don't care about me. I've told you 100 times that we don't need, this many, whatever you bought, kind of thing, but
Yeah.
you keep
Yeah.
buying it and we end up wasting food, whatever it is. And then you realize, oh, they were actually, when I saw, they were actually being really thoughtful of me and asked, ask the person behind the deli counter for less than the normal portion. And,
Yeah.
so we miss a lot of details if we don't take that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Very interesting. So obviously it's one thing if a couple is sitting in therapy with you and you're walking through these talking versus listening roles and stuff. For the couple at home who's like not in therapy and doesn't have that really like controlled, like safe setting, what are some really practical ways they can implement this at home?
I would put a timer on yourselves, right? So you would
Okay.
say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, like one person gets to talk, and then you switch. At 5 minutes, the other person gets to talk.
Yeah.
So it's a way where it puts some boundaries on the conversation and not let it get too out of hand. It also forces you to be concise
True.
because sometimes you think, oh, 5 minutes, yeah, I should be able to get what I want to say out in 5 minutes, but you'd be surprised. People can go on for quite a long time.
Very true. Very true.
So that way it doesn't become overwhelming and exhausting for either of you as well. So
Yeah.
I would put a time, 5 minutes for each person to talk, and then another 5 minutes to say, okay, now what is it? What are we going to do? What's the solution? So
Yeah.
15 minutes, hopefully, if it's not a really heavy, serious topic, that you guys can pretty easily come up with something by that point.
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful. So I know we touched on this a little bit, but going back to trust, I know this is it's such a tricky thing for a lot of people. And I think a lot of our listeners have probably either they're dating or they're in early marriage and maybe they've had some bad experiences with past relationships or even current relationships where trust is really hard for them. How can couples build trust, and how can I was thinking about this too, like how can people learn to trust themselves after like maybe making bad decisions in relationships in the past?
Yeah, yeah. There's a few ways. I would say the biggest key factors that you need in rebuilding trust are taking responsibility. What's your role in the situation, and taking full responsibility? No excuses. No, well, you put me in a bad mood because of this, or if you hadn't have done this, I wouldn't have felt the need to. Just taking full responsibility for your action.
Mhm.
And then really the other person needs to be willing to forgive.
Yeah.
Somebody can take responsibility for what they did, but is the other person willing to forgive and say, okay, I'm going to give you that other chance and we're going to give this a try? If we don't have both of those, then we kind of have a problem. We're at an impasse. Um, and then I would say clear expectations, right? Am I being really clear about my concerns? Do we have an opportunity to discuss those openly? And giving ourselves the time to rebuild trust, it really takes a lot of patience. I think people want to rush through that, and trust is really this process. I like to think of rebuilding trust or broken trust as a building. So if you were to think of trust in your relationship as a building, somebody does something to break trust, that all of that comes crumbling down. And now we have to rebuild brick by brick. And so sometimes what you see is couples get frustrated and a little impatient because, I don't know, let's say the one person who did something wrong feels like, oh my gosh, can't you see I've laid 20 bricks here? Like, why do you keep bringing this
Yeah.
up? Why do you keep like reminding me what I did wrong? Can't we move past this? It's in the past.
Mhm.
And but the reality is your building was 30 stories high and you've only
Yeah.
laid 20 bricks. And so we have to really be patient with this trust rebuilding process, that every little moment matters and takes time. And there's going to be, you want to give, there's no rush, essentially. It's okay that it takes
Yeah.
time to read. Again, depending on the severity of the offense, right?
Right.
Um, so I think those are the biggest things: patience, clear communication, taking responsibility, and forgiveness.
Sure. Sure. That's good. And for that person struggling to forgive, I'm sure that's a lot of our listeners. Um, what can you do to move past some of the, well, not move past, but like truly understand that it does take hard work and it will take a lot of time to rebuild, but acknowledging your, your partner's efforts. How can people do that?
Sometimes it's really helpful to have a check-in, again, depending on how serious the offense is. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody spent a large amount of money unbeknownst to the other person, if somebody, if there was an infidelity situation, I'm talking really serious situations, you want to have opportunities where we can check in once
Yeah.
a week, every other week to say, how are you dealing with this? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And that gives an opportunity for that person who's struggling with forgiveness to say, I'm having a really hard time, but I really appreciate, I see how intentional you're being with
Mm-hmm.
telling me where you're going every day and,
Yeah.
texting me throughout the day. I really appreciate that. But every now and then a memory comes up and I panic and I worry and, it's
Sure.
emotionally, I'm scared, but I really appreciate you trying. So
Yeah.
that way the couple feels more like you're on a team working through it together as
Yeah.
opposed to being isolated in that process and feeling alone, that you can both hold space for each other, right? And for the other person to say, yeah, I'm so sorry, I'm doing everything I can, I'm
Mm-hmm.
texting you throughout the day, and I'm sorry for hurting you, and I know this is really hard, and
Yeah.
I feel so bad, right? So you get those opportunities.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Um, yeah, kind of shifting gears a little bit. So our show is for people who have discerned marriage, right? So no matter what stage they might be in, they might be single, but they know they really want to get married or engaged and navigating that season or in early marriage. Um, and I'm sure you've got so much to say about this, but um, what are some of the kind of day-to-day little things couples can do to build really healthy, loving relationships? A lot of times we think of the big romantic gesture as like, the thing that makes a relationship special. But a lot of the times, Catholic couples are married for 40, 50 years. And so the big romantic gestures can't be every day. So, what are the little kind of daily habits that you've seen be really effective for couples?
Yeah, there are these small rituals, if you will, or things that couples do that they don't even realize or think about that are very
Mm,
unique to each couple. And
mm,
you want to know what those are, right? What are those small things that you can focus on that your beloved really enjoys or appreciates and focus on that? So, something as small as how do we say good morning or good night to each other? How do we greet one another when somebody comes home from work or after a long day? Are you busy kind of like doing the dishes and yelling like, "Oh, hey, welcome home," or do you stop what you're doing, go to the door, greet them, right? And so all of those the rituals really add up into the small things of what does my life look like day to day?
sure.
Um, do we have ways to connect at the end of a day? Do we have like a tradition of, cocktails at 5 o'clock, or do I make her that cup of tea that she likes every morning? Do I bring him coffee in bed on the weekends? Do
Yeah.
we do we chit chat and hang out while we're doing the dishes together? Somebody washes, the other person dries. And so whatever that is for you, I'm not implying that you have to do all of these things, but you know what the other person really likes and appreciates, and you can build sort of these way making these mundane moments more of a connecting kind of moment. While you're getting ready for bed, if somebody's brushing their teeth, are we sharing about our days or connecting in some way? Or are we just kind of standing there silently or not even next to each other? One person does it at a different time than the other. And so there's lots of mini rituals, I would say, that you can pay attention to that really add up into the bigger part of what your life is.
Yeah. And kind of on the flip side of that, if people have unhealthy habits or like they haven't built those rituals where they are able to connect, or life with the kids is really busy and it's just, the relationship kind of falls to the last thing on the to-do list. What are some like little things people can start doing, like, just as a stepping stone to kind of forming these rituals and getting closer and building that relationship?
I would just pick one to focus
Okay.
on for a
Yeah.
week. I would say, okay, for the next week, we're going to do this every morning when we wake up, or every day when somebody gets home from work, we're going to do X. We're going to hug, we're going to kiss, we're going to
Yeah.
take 2 minutes to say, how was your day? And then, whatever, go on with our evening,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But practice, say, forget everything else. This is the one thing we're going to focus on developing for this 1 week. And then you can slowly add and build from there. Then at the end of the
Nice.
week, you can decide if you liked it or not, if you want to keep doing it or not,
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
adjustments and go from there.
I like it. Okay. Very cool. And then I'm thinking about the single person in particular who's listening to this. But it obviously applies to everyone. Um, what do what does virtue building and growing in your personal traits and characteristics, what does that contribute to a relationship? Why would that be important for someone who might not even be in a romantic relationship yet?
Yeah, I think virtue is what we're called to do, to live and develop as Christians. And so virtue helps us to live more like Christ.
Yeah.
And so the people within around us and in our communities are going to benefit from that, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, a family member. People are going to experience Christ's love more. The more that we can cultivate virtue, the more that people experience Christ's love through us. And so I think it's not wasted when we
Yeah.
are able to cultivate virtue.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and again, I know you probably have a million stories on this, but what is a virtue that you've seen just really help build a strong relationship, a strong marriage in your work?
Hmm.
There's so
Um,
many. I mean,
there
it's a
are
balance, but
There are so many. Yeah, I think humility is a big one. Humility is a big one. And some type of docility, openness,
yeah,
patience, I think could be a very big one as well. It just seems to be this healing balm that really brings people together and puts defenses down when those are part of the mix.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's true. I agree. Um, okay, so some advice for a couple who's just started out and is um, trying to have a really healthy, really happy relationship that hopefully leads to marriage. Um, what would you say to that couple? What should they start with right off the bat as they're dating?
Oh, as they're dating. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think, well, yeah, I think the virtues can be really important, right?
Hmm.
Patience, humility, self discipline. I think discipline is important as
For
you're
sure.
dating, right? Can I choose love over reactivity? So, relationships inevitably trigger some type of emotion. There's going to be discussions, conflict, arguments. And so, self discipline really helps us manage our impulses. So, we're not snapping back in anger as much, saying things we regret,
Yeah.
making sure we're pausing before responding. I think newly dating couples, it's less of a concern because generally speaking, you're usually very happy to be together. There's those
Right.
honeymoon stages.
Hmm.
But if you're noticing that there is some reactivity in your conflict, I think self discipline can be huge. And it just also helps usher in trust, right? When you need that healing, consistently being able to be disciplined in your conversation really
Yeah.
goes a long way for the foundation of a relationship, right? And so you got to think about how that feeds into your friendship, which I think is important overall as well. Is, are we prioritizing time together? Again, really easy in the early stages of a relationship.
Yeah.
And as life demands pull on you, that can be a strain and harder to do. So just making sure you keep that consistently throughout the relationship. Because there's so many couples that I meet who look up after 20, 25 years of marriage, kids are out of the house, and they realize, oh my goodness, who is this person? I don't have a connection with this person at all anymore. And so if
Yeah.
you're not careful and on top of that, it can really slip away from you.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. And then um, for the newly married couple who maybe is in like, I don't know, the first 5 years of marriage and might start to see like every day is not the honeymoon phase or the honeymoon stage, and maybe resentment is starting to build. How can you just nip that, right in the bud for those newly married couples?
I would talk about it.
Yeah,
Don't sweep it under the rug. Bring it out into the open in a calm, respectful way, not
yeah,
accusatory, right? We want to make sure we're always keeping that space between us as life affirming as possible.
sure.
Um, and so the longer we wait and delay, the more that resentment builds over time, and it's never
Mhm.
helpful for the relationship. So I would take care of it as soon as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And then this is for could be for an individual or for a couple, but as a counselor, when when is a good time for someone to seek out therapy? Um, I know I've heard a lot of statistics about like people should have gone maybe 5 years before they go, but they let the problem kind of build and build and build, at least with couples. And so, you know, a lot of people listening to this haven't been married for long, but that doesn't mean, counseling or therapy wouldn't be a good option. So, yeah, what is your advice there on when people should seek help?
Yeah, definitely don't wait. And you're right. The average for a couple is 6 to 7 years of experiencing
Mm,
problems in their relationships before they seek therapy.
yeah,
6 to 7 years is such a long time to wait and let
too long.
resentment build and fester. And a lot of times by that point, somebody's got a foot out the door and at
Yeah,
the end of their rope. And so you really want to come in sooner. So if you're noticing
yeah,
you guys are having the same conversations over and over, or even as a single person, you're experiencing the same thing over and over. I keep hitting this wall. I'm not making
mhm,
progress. Why is this coming up again? I've been trying a lot of things. I've been reading books. I've been looking online and I'm implementing things and it just still keeps happening over and over. I feel stuck and
yeah,
repeating the same cycle. That's a good sign that you would benefit from some therapy. Just get that outside professional
yeah,
to help you through that time. I mean, there's no shame in that. We all have moments in our life where we benefit from the help of other people in our lives, and so might as well.
true, true, for sure. And then, how can people, you know, find you? Do you offer like online services? Tell me about a little bit about your practice and how people can maybe seek help from you if they would like.
Yeah, so you can find us at heartspacetherapycenter.com. That's our website. And we do offer virtual and in person sessions. So if you're in the Orlando area, come see us, come say hello. But we have virtual services as well. So that would be the main way to find us.
I love it. That's great. And then I just wanted to ask for someone who might be feeling really discouraged about this topic, um, and feeling like either if they're single, like I don't have the tools to have a healthy, happy relationship, or if it's a couple, like we're really failing, we're struggling to build a happy relationship. What would be kind of some words of encouragement for them as we sign off?
Hang in there. You're probably doing better than you think, even though it's really hard, emotionally taxing. There is always hope for you. And so the fact that you desire change, that you're seeking growth means you're on your way. And so I would just say keep going and then reach out to somebody for support, whether it's a spiritual director, somebody ahead of you in marriage or in dating and relationships that you look up to for solid advice, a therapist, just connect with somebody to help you during that time.
Yeah, that's great. Well, awesome. Any other thoughts or anything else you'd want to share with our audience?
I do have a free downloadable on the website. So if you guys go to heartspacetherapycenter.com, we have a downloadable of 10 ways to strengthen your marriage. You're welcome to check that out. We also have a marriage course called Discovering Deep Love. You can also find that on the website. And so if you want to dive a little deeper and explore some of those aspects of communication and forgiveness, we have that there as well.
So we'll make sure to link that below in the show notes. But thank you so much, Regina. That was really great.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this episode of After Cana, share it with a friend, leave a review, or head to the Ferris Love website for more resources on building relationships and families of faith.